My hands were shaking as I stared at the IRS letter. $800,000. That's what I owed in taxes on money I no longer had. Money that had vanished faster than it appeared. 3 months ago, I was the guy everyone wanted to be, the meme stock millionaire who turned 5 grand into 2 million practically overnight. Today, I'm sitting in my studio apartment eating ramen, wondering how the hell everything went so wrong. You probably saw my story back in 2021. Maybe you even followed my posts on Reddit. I was Chris to the Moon, the 27-year-old warehouse worker who threw his entire savings into GameStop stock and rode it to the stratosphere. $2 million. From 5,000. The American dream, right there in my Robinhood account. But here's what nobody tells you about getting rich quick. It's just as easy to get poor even quicker. Let me take you back to the beginning. January 2021. I was working night shifts at an Amazon warehouse in Ohio, living paycheck to paycheck like most people my age. My girlfriend Sarah had just moved in with me and we were talking about maybe getting engaged once I saved up enough for a decent ring. $5,000 was literally everything I had. My entire emergency fund scraped together over 2 years of 60-hour weeks and skipping meals. Then I discovered Wall Street bets. The energy in that subreddit was intoxicating. Thousands of regular people, just like me, talking about taking down hedge funds and making life-changing money. The GameStop squeeze was building momentum and everyone was posting screenshots of their gains. Ordinary people turning thousands into hundreds of thousands. I remember one post, a guy who paid off his mom's mortgage with his profits. Another who bought his wife the dream car she'd always wanted. I wanted that. God, I wanted that so badly I could taste it. Sarah tried to talk me out of it. We fought for 3 straight nights. She kept saying it was gambling, that we should be saving for our future, not throwing it away on some internet conspiracy. But I was convinced I knew something she didn't. I'd done the research, read the analysis, watched the YouTube videos. This was our shot. Our one chance to break free from the endless cycle of bills and overtime and never having enough. So I did it. January 27, 2021. I transferred every penny we had and bought GameStop at $42 a share. What happened next still feels like a fever dream. The stock exploded. $50. $70. $100. $200. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications from my trading app. 5,000 became 20,000. Then 50. Then 100. I should have sold then. Any rational person would have sold then. But rational went out the window when I saw that account balance hit 7 figures. $1.2 million. More money than my parents had ever seen in their entire lives combined. I took a screenshot and posted it on Reddit. The upvotes and comments poured in. Thousands of people calling me a legend, asking for advice, treating me like some kind of financial genius. The attention was addictive. For the first time in my life, I felt important. Special. Like I'd figured out something that everyone else had missed. Sarah was terrified. She kept begging me to cash out, to take the money and run. But I was high on my own success, convinced that if I could turn 5,000 into over $1 million, I could turn that million into 10 million. The stock kept climbing. $300 a share. $350. $400. At the peak, my account showed $2.3 million. I'll never forget that moment. I was at work, standing in the warehouse break room, staring at my phone screen. $2,300,000. Enough to buy a house. Start a business. Never worry about money again. I actually started crying right there, surrounded by boxes and conveyor belts. But I didn't sell. The crash came fast and brutal. One day the stock was at $400. 3 days later it was at 40. My 2 million became 1 million. Then 500,000. Then 200. I watched it all disappear in real time, refreshing my app every few seconds, each refresh showing another chunk of my future evaporating. The comments on my Reddit posts changed from celebration to sympathy to mockery. People started calling me an idiot, asking how it felt to lose everything. By February 15th, my account was worth $38,000. I'd lost over 90% of my peak value. But even that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what happened next. See, when you make money trading stocks, you owe taxes on those gains. Even if you lose it all later. The IRS doesn't care that you were stupid enough to ride it back down. They only care about the profit you made when you sold, and I had sold some shares during the run-up to pay for things. Stupid things. When my account hit $1 million, I got reckless. I pulled out 50,000 and bought a brand new BMW. Another 20 grand went to a Rolex because I wanted to look like the successful trader I thought I was. I spent $15,000 on a weekend in Vegas, posting photos on Instagram of champagne bottles and casino chips. I bought Sarah a $5,000 engagement ring without even proposing properly, just handed it to her like it was nothing. Each sale triggered a taxable event. Each withdrawal meant I owed Uncle Sam his cut. By the time I did the math with a tax professional, the damage was clear. Even after accounting for my losses, I owed the government over $800,000. Money I no longer had. Sarah left me in March. I don't blame her. The man she fell in love with was responsible, careful, someone who worked hard and saved every penny. The man I became was a stranger to both of us. Arrogant, reckless, convinced of his own brilliance right up until reality came crashing down. She moved out while I was at work, left a note saying she couldn't watch me destroy yourself anymore. The ring was sitting on the kitchen counter, still in its box. That's when the real spiral began. With the tax bill looming and my account nearly empty, I did what desperate people do. I borrowed money. First from my parents, who mortgaged their house to help me. Then from credit cards. Then from friends who still believed I was some kind of financial wizard who just needed another shot. I threw good money after bad, chasing the high of that first win. I tried day trading, options, cryptocurrency, anything that promised quick returns. But the magic was gone. Every trade seemed to move against me the moment I made it. My debt grew larger while my account grew smaller. The people who used to celebrate my wins on social media disappeared. The financial influencers who'd interviewed me about my success stopped returning my calls. The Reddit community that had once worshipped me started using my story as a cautionary tale. I became the poster child for everything wrong with meme stock culture. By summer, I was broke and broken. The IRS had started garnishing my wages. My parents were facing foreclosure because of the money they'd lent me. I'd burned through every friendship, every relationship, every safety net I'd ever had. I hit rock bottom on a Tuesday in August. I was sitting in my empty apartment. Sarah had taken most of the furniture when she left, staring at yet another margin call notice. I had $87 in my checking account and over $1 million in debt. I thought about ending it all. The shame, the guilt, the crushing weight of knowing I'd destroyed not just my own life but the lives of everyone who'd tried to help me. My parents. My ex-girlfriend. Friends who'd believed in me and lost their own money following my lead. But something stopped me. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was the realization that destroying myself wouldn't fix the damage I'd caused to others. Or maybe it was the voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like Sarah telling me I was better than this. That night, I made a decision. I was going to climb out of this hole. Not with some get-rich-quick scheme or miracle trade, but the hard way. The right way. I got a second job. Then a third. Warehouse work during the day, restaurant delivery at night, freelance writing on weekends. 18-hour days, 7 days a week. Every penny I earned went toward debt payments or basic survival. The transition was brutal. Going from feeling like a millionaire to counting quarters for laundry money. I remember the first time I had to ask for an advance on my paycheck just to buy groceries. The humiliation was almost physical, like a weight pressing down on my chest. But the hardest part wasn't the money. It was facing people who knew my story. The warehouse where I worked was the same one I'd left during my brief moment of wealth. My old supervisor, Mike, had seen me on local news when I was riding high, talking about how regular people could beat Wall Street at their own game. Now here I was asking for my old job back. Mike was decent about it. He didn't make me grovel or throw my failures in my face. But I could see the pity in his eyes, and that was almost worse than anger would have been. "You sure you want to come back to this?" he asked during my interview. "Last time you were here, you were talking about how you'd never have to work for anyone else again." I swallowed my pride. I was wrong about a lot of things back then. The other workers weren't as kind. Some of them had followed my Reddit posts, had even made their own trades based on my advice. A few had lost money when the meme stock bubble burst. They didn't let me forget it. Every break room conversation would go quiet when I walked in. I'd hear whispers behind my back. "That's the guy who lost $2 million. Can you imagine being that stupid?" Serves him right for thinking he was better than us. They weren't wrong. I had thought I was better than them. I'd looked down on their steady paychecks and traditional investments. I'd mocked their fear of taking risks. Now I was begging for the chance to earn their steady paychecks again. I moved into a studio apartment that barely qualified as housing. 400 square feet of concrete walls and fluorescent lighting. No windows in the bedroom. The shower leaked and the neighbors played music until 3 in the morning. It was everything I'd sworn I'd never accept again. But it was what I could afford. $300 a month plus utilities. I sold everything I owned to make the deposit. The BMW, the Rolex, even my gaming console. The BMW alone had depreciated $20,000 from what I'd paid for it. The Rolex was worth maybe 60% of its retail price. Every sale was a reminder of how much money I'd burned through during my brief moment of success. I ate nothing but rice, beans, and whatever free food I could find. There was a church downtown that served meals on Sundays, no questions asked. I started going, not for the religion but for the one hot meal I could count on each week. The first time I sat in that church basement, spooning donated soup into my mouth, I thought about how far I'd fallen. 6 months earlier, I'd been posting photos of $100 steaks on Instagram. Now I was grateful for canned soup and day-old bread. But something unexpected happened in that church basement. I met other people who'd lost everything. Not through stock trading, but through medical bills, divorce, job loss, addiction. People who'd had their own moments of being on top of the world only to watch it all crumble. There was Maria, a former real estate agent who'd lost her house in the 2008 crash and never recovered. She was 63 years old and worked 3 part-time jobs to afford her studio apartment. She never complained, never talked about the life she used to have. She just focused on getting through each day with dignity. There was Jerome, a veteran who'd come back from Afghanistan with PTSD and a pill addiction that cost him his marriage, his job, and his savings. He'd been clean for 2 years but was still rebuilding his life one day at a time. These people taught me something important. I wasn't special. My fall from grace wasn't unique or dramatic. It was just another version of the same story that happens to thousands of people every day. The only difference was that mine had played out in public on social media for everyone to see. For 6 months, I lived like a monk, focused on nothing but earning money and paying down debt. I worked 18-hour days without a single day off. My hands were permanently stained from the warehouse work. My car smelled like pizza and Chinese food from the delivery job. My eyes burned from staring at computer screens during my freelance writing sessions. But I was making progress. Slow, painful progress, but progress nonetheless. The IRS had agreed to a payment plan. $3,000 a month for the next 22 years. It would eat up most of my income, but it was manageable if I lived like a monk. My parents had worked out a deal with their mortgage company. They'd been able to refinance and lower their payments, though they'd lost most of their home equity in the process. The guilt over that nearly broke me some nights. The friends I borrowed money from were complicated. Some understood and were patient. Others wrote me off entirely. A few demanded immediate repayment and threatened legal action when I couldn't deliver. One friendship that ended particularly badly was with my college roommate, Jake. I borrowed $15,000 from him during my desperate phase, promising to pay it back within a month once my next big trade paid off. When that trade lost money instead of making it, I had to tell him the truth. "You're not the same person I knew in college," he said when I tried to explain. That Chris was honest. He was reliable. He'd worked 3 jobs before he'd borrow money he couldn't pay back. "I don't know who you are now, but you're not my friend." That conversation happened in a coffee shop near his office. I'd driven 2 hours to meet him, hoping to explain my situation and work out a payment plan. Instead, I drove 2 hours back home with another burned bridge behind me. But not all the conversations went that way. Some people surprised me with their understanding and patience. Slowly, painfully, I started to make progress. The IRS set up a payment plan. My parents managed to avoid foreclosure by selling some land they'd inherited. I began rebuilding relationships, one awkward conversation at a time. But the weight of my mistakes followed me everywhere. There were days when the shame was so heavy I could barely get out of bed. Days when I'd catch myself staring at my reflection and wondering how I'd become someone I didn't recognize. The breaking point came on a cold Thursday in February, almost exactly a year after I'd lost everything. I was working my delivery shift, driving through neighborhoods where I used to dream of buying a house. My car had broken down twice that week, and I'd had to borrow money from my parents just to get it fixed. I pulled up to deliver Chinese food to a house that looked exactly like the one Sarah and I used to talk about buying. White picket fence, 2-car garage, kids' toys scattered across the lawn. Through the window, I could see a family having dinner together. The dad was helping his daughter with homework while the mom set the table. It was everything I'd thrown away. I sat in my beat-up Honda, holding a bag of someone else's dinner, and just started crying. Not the angry tears I'd shed when I lost the money, but deep, soul-crushing sobs for the life I'd destroyed and the person I'd become. That's when my phone rang. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. We hadn't spoken in almost 6 months. The last conversation had been awkward and painful, full of things we both wanted to say but couldn't find the words for. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Chris. Her voice was soft, tentative. I heard you're working again. Multiple jobs. Yeah, I managed. Trying to pay back what I owe. That's good. That's really good. She paused. Listen, I called because I wanted to tell you something. I'm seeing someone now. It's getting serious and I wanted you to hear it from me. The words hit like a physical blow. I'd known this day would come, but hearing it was different than imagining it. That's good, I said and meant it. You deserve to be happy. Chris, I need you to know what happened between us. It wasn't just about the money. It was about who you became when you had it. The lies, the secrecy, the way you stopped listening to anyone who disagreed with you. I couldn't watch you destroy yourself anymore. I sat there in my car, watching that perfect family through their window and finally understood what I'd really lost. It wasn't the money. Money was just numbers on a screen. What I'd lost was the person Sarah had fallen in love with. The person my friends had trusted. The person my parents had raised. I know, I whispered. I know exactly who I became. And you were right to leave. She was quiet for a moment. Then, for what it's worth, the person I'm talking to right now, he sounds more like the Chris I remember than the one I left. After she hung up, I sat in that car for another 20 minutes, watching that family finish their dinner. The dad helped clear the table. The mom tucked the kids into bed. Normal, beautiful, everyday moments that I'd traded away for numbers on a phone screen. But something shifted in me that night. Maybe it was finally letting go of the fantasy that Sarah and I might get back together. Maybe it was accepting that the life I'd planned was never going to happen. Or maybe it was just hitting rock bottom so hard that the only direction left was up. Whatever it was, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Not hope exactly, but determination. The kind of grim, stubborn resolve that comes from having nothing left to lose. But the real breakthrough came when I decided to do something I'd sworn I'd never do again. Go public with my story. The idea came from the strangest place. I was browsing YouTube during one of my rare breaks, watching videos about personal finance and debt recovery. Most of them were made by people who'd never really struggled, who spoke in theoretical terms about budgeting and discipline. I found myself getting angry at their simple answers to complex problems. Just stop spending money you don't have. Create a budget and stick to it. Build an emergency fund. Easy to say when you've never felt the crushing weight of knowing you've destroyed your parents' financial security. Easy to say when you've never had to choose between paying rent and paying for food. Easy to say when you've never looked in the mirror and seen a person you don't recognize staring back at you. That night, I made a video. Nothing fancy, just my phone camera pointed at my face while I sat in my tiny apartment. I didn't show my face. I'd learned my lesson about internet fame. Just my voice and some simple graphics. I called it How I Lost $2 Million and Owe the IRS My Soul. I told the whole story. Not the sanitized version I'd been giving people who asked, but the brutal, humiliating truth. The greed, the arrogance, the way I dismissed everyone who tried to warn me. The sleepless nights, the panic attacks, the moment I'd seriously considered ending my life. I talked about what it felt like to watch your entire future disappear in real time. About having to ask for your old job back from people you'd once looked down on. About eating donated soup while wearing a Rolex you couldn't afford to sell because you owed more on it than it was worth. I uploaded it at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday and went to bed expecting maybe a dozen views from other insomniacs. I woke up to over 50,000 views and hundreds of comments. The response shocked me. Not because people were mean, though some were, but because so many shared their own stories of financial ruin. Day traders who'd lost their kids' college funds. Crypto investors who'd mortgaged their homes and lost everything. People who'd followed influencers off cliffs and were left to pick up the pieces alone. One comment stuck with me, "Thank you for telling the truth." Every other How I Lost Everything story ends with, "But it all worked out in the end." You're still in the middle of it, still fighting your way back. That gives me hope that I can fight my way back too. I realized I wasn't alone. There were thousands of us, maybe hundreds of thousands, who'd gotten caught up in the get-rich-quick fever of 2021 and paid the ultimate price. But nobody was talking about it honestly. Everyone was either still pretending they were winners or had moved on to the next scheme. So I made another video. Then another. Not trying to build an audience or make money, just documenting the slow, painful process of rebuilding a life after you've destroyed it. I talked about the practical stuff, negotiating with creditors, finding multiple income streams, living on rice and beans for months at a time. But I also talked about the emotional stuff that nobody else was discussing. The shame, the guilt, the way financial ruin changes how you see yourself and how others see you. Within 3 months, I had over 100,000 subscribers. Within 6 months, it was 200,000. People weren't just watching, they were sharing their own stories in the comments, creating a community of people who'd made similar mistakes and were working to rebuild their lives. Brands started reaching out about sponsorships. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, potentially making money by talking about how I'd lost money. I turned down most of them. The last thing I needed was to get rich again by exploiting my own failure. But I did start something legitimate. Something that felt like it could actually help people instead of just entertaining them. I launched a financial coaching service for people recovering from trading addiction and investment losses. Not some get-rich-quick scheme or day trading course, but practical guidance on debt management, budgeting, and rebuilding your credit after financial catastrophe. The first client was a woman named Janet from Phoenix. She'd lost her retirement savings trading options based on tips from a YouTube guru. She was 58 years old and facing the possibility of working until she died. Our first conversation lasted 3 hours. She cried. I cried. We talked about the shame, the self-blame, the way financial mistakes can make you feel like a complete failure as a human being. But we also talked about practical steps. How to negotiate with creditors. How to rebuild an emergency fund when you're living paycheck to paycheck. How to invest again without falling back into the same destructive patterns. 6 months later, Janet had paid off her credit card debt and started rebuilding her retirement savings. She sent me a photo of herself on her first vacation in 2 years, nothing fancy, just a weekend camping trip with her daughter. But she looked genuinely happy for the first time since I'd known her. That's when I knew I'd found my purpose. Not to get rich again, but to help other people avoid the mistakes I'd made or recover from similar ones. The business grew slowly but steadily. I partnered with a licensed financial advisor to make sure I was giving sound advice. I developed worksheets and guides for debt recovery. I started hosting weekly group calls for people working through similar situations. It wasn't glamorous work. Most of my clients were dealing with problems that would take years to solve. But it was meaningful work. Work that helped people instead of exploiting them. The YouTube channel became a platform for education rather than entertainment. I interviewed other people who'd lost everything and rebuilt their lives. I brought on experts to talk about debt consolidation, credit repair, and long-term investing strategies. But I never forgot where I came from. Every video, every client consultation, every piece of advice was filtered through the memory of sitting in my car, crying over Chinese takeout, wondering how I destroyed everything good in my life. It's been 3 years now since my fall from grace. I've paid off about 60% of my debt to the IRS. My parents not only kept their house but managed to rebuild some of their savings. Most of the friends I'd borrowed money from have been paid back, though some relationships never fully recovered. I'm in a new relationship now with someone who knew about my past before our first date and chose to see me anyway. Her name is Emma, and she's a social worker who understands what it means to help people rebuild their lives from nothing. Our first date was coffee at a diner near my apartment. I told her my story within the first hour, expecting her to make an excuse and leave. Instead, she asked thoughtful questions about what I'd learned and how I changed. The person who made those mistakes, she said, is that who you are now? I thought about it for a moment. No. That person was driven by fear and greed and ego. I'm driven by, I guess, by wanting to be useful. Wanting to help people avoid the mistakes I made. She smiled. Then that's who I'm having coffee with. Not the person you used to be. Emma has seen me at my worst. She's held me during panic attacks when the weight of my remaining debt felt overwhelming. She's listened to me beat myself up over mistakes I made years ago. But she's also seen the work I do now, the people I help, the purpose I've found in my failure. We don't live together yet. I'm still in that same studio apartment, still paying most of my income toward debt. But we talk about the future now in ways I never could with Sarah. Realistic plans based on who we actually are, not fantasies based on who we wish we were. The business has grown beyond what I ever expected. I now have 4 other coaches working with me, all people who've been through their own financial disasters and rebuilt their lives. We've helped over 2,000 people work through debt problems, trading addiction, and the psychological aftermath of financial ruin. But here's what I want you to understand. The money wasn't the worst part of what I lost. It was the person I became when I had it. The arrogance, the certainty that I was smarter than everyone else, the way I dismissed people who tried to warn me about the risks. Success, especially sudden success, can be more dangerous than failure. Failure teaches you humility. Success can teach you to be a fool. I still think about those few weeks when I was worth over $2 million. Not with regret exactly, but with a kind of fascination. Like looking at photos of yourself from high school and wondering what you were thinking when you chose that haircut. The person I was during that time feels like a stranger now. Someone I knew briefly but never really understood. He was so certain that he'd figured out something everyone else had missed. So convinced that he was special, chosen, different from all the other people who'd lost everything chasing get-rich-quick schemes. I have more empathy for him now than I used to. He wasn't evil, just human. Scared of being ordinary, desperate to prove he was worth something, intoxicated by the first taste of real success he'd ever experienced. But I'm grateful he's gone. The person I am now, he's not perfect, but he's honest. He knows his limitations. He understands that sustainable success is built on patience, discipline, and helping others, not on viral moments and social media fame. I still trade occasionally, but never more than I can afford to lose. My portfolio looks boring now: index funds, blue chip stocks, the kind of investments that financial advisors recommend, and Reddit mocks. It grows slowly, steadily, without the drama or excitement that once drove me. Sometimes clients ask me if I miss the thrill of high-risk trading. The answer is complicated. Do I miss the rush of watching my account balance swing by tens of thousands of dollars in a single day? Sometimes. But I've learned that addiction and excitement aren't the same thing as success. The most successful people I know now, the ones who've built real, lasting wealth, they're boring. They invest in diversified portfolios. They live below their means. They make decisions based on data rather than emotions. They get rich slowly, steadily, without anyone noticing or caring. That's the kind of rich I'm trying to become now. Not internet famous rich. Not lottery winner rich. Just quietly, responsibly wealthy enough to take care of my family and help other people when they need it. The YouTube channel has evolved too. It's less about my personal story now and more about practical education. We cover topics like debt consolidation, credit repair, long-term investing strategies, and the psychology of money. The audience has grown to over 500,000 subscribers, but the focus has shifted from entertainment to education. Sometimes I get messages from people who followed my original meme stock posts back in 2021. Some of them made money and got out early. Others lost everything like I did. A few are still chasing the next big score, still convinced that they can beat the market with clever timing and insider knowledge. I try to help when I can, but you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. I learned that the hard way with myself. Change has to come from within, usually after you've hit bottom hard enough to realize that what you've been doing isn't working. The hardest part of my recovery wasn't the money or the debt or even the public humiliation. It was learning to forgive myself. To accept that I'd made terrible mistakes without letting those mistakes define me forever. There's a difference between guilt and shame that took me years to understand. Guilt is I did something bad. Shame is I am bad. Guilt can motivate you to change. Shame just paralyzes you. I spent months trapped in shame, believing that I was fundamentally flawed, that the mistakes I'd made revealed some essential weakness in my character. It wasn't until I started helping other people that I realized everyone makes mistakes. The only difference is whether you learn from them or let them destroy you. Recovery isn't linear. There are still days when the weight of what I lost feels overwhelming. Days when I wonder what my life would look like if I'd made different choices. Days when the shame comes flooding back and I can barely function. But those days are fewer now. And when they come, I have tools to deal with them. I have a support system. I have meaningful work that reminds me why I'm fighting to rebuild my life. Most importantly, I have perspective. The crisis that felt like the end of the world 3 years ago is now the foundation for everything good in my life. My relationship with Emma, my business, my YouTube channel, my ability to help other people, none of it would exist if I hadn't lost everything first. I'm not grateful for the pain, but I'm grateful for what I learned from it. I'm not thankful for the mistakes, but I'm thankful for the person those mistakes taught me to become. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd sold at the peak. If I'd taken that $2 million and walked away. Would I be happy? Would Sarah and I be married? Would I still be the same person who fell in love with the attention and validation of strangers on the internet? I think about the alternate version of myself sometimes, the one who made the smart choice, who sold at the top and lived happily ever after. But then I remember all the people I've helped through my channel, all the conversations with folks who were standing on the same cliff I jumped from. Maybe this is where I was supposed to end up. Not rich, not famous, but useful. Someone who learned the hard way so others don't have to. The meme stock era changed a lot of lives. Some people got rich and stayed rich. Others got rich and lost it all. But the lucky ones, the really lucky ones, learned something valuable from the experience. I learned that the person you become when you're winning matters more than the winning itself. That sustainable success is built on patience, discipline, and humility, not on viral moments and social media fame. And I learned that rock bottom isn't the end of your story. It's just the foundation for whatever you build next. If you've got a similar story or know someone who does, drop it in the comments below. Sometimes the best healing comes from knowing you're not alone in your struggles. Hit subscribe if this resonated with you.